we got to address our crisis of gun violence and unsafe streets. We need to restore our neighborhoods. We need to create jobs and grow our city. And we also need to repair the broken relationship that we have with state government.
Mayor-elect Cavalier Johnson is here. Welcome back to Upfront and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Happy to be here.
So we want to start with that soundbite in mind. Now, after Tuesday's election, I know that you already reached out to Republican leadership. So who did you reach out to?
I reached out to Speaker Voss. We got a call into Senator LeMahieu. We've had some other conversations on social media with other Republican members as well. Also had the opportunity to speak with Representative Jesse Rodriguez as well. So we're making those inroads to build the relationship. Did
you hear back from Speaker Voss yet?
I did.
And what did you talk about?
He called me back a little later in the day. He congratulated me on the victory, and we talked about building the relationship. And he certainly wants to do that. I want to do that as well.
Did he seem optimistic, or what was the tone of that conversation?
Oh, yeah. He was totally upbeat and I think very interested in engaging anew with me as mayor and with the city of Milwaukee.
Did you set any future expectations in terms of meeting or anything on policy?
Yeah, after the swearing in that we'll have next week, he and I will try to find some time to get together.
And well, along those same lines, I want to bring up something Representative David Bowen said on Twitter. He gave you a congratulations and said that Milwaukee's essential path forward will be impacted by the state capitol, and Voss and Wisconsin GOP will no longer be able to blame their old nemesis, Tom Barrett. It is a new day. How much do you think former Mayor Barrett is to blame for this fractured relationship with Madison?
Look, these issues are about relationships, right? And there certainly had been a long relationship with the former mayor and with members of the legislature. Going back to especially not just his time in the legislature, but also his time running for governor. Twice in 2010 in an open seat, but then in the recall election as well. And I think that's part of the reason that we saw this fracturing. And we just were never able to recover from that. But Representative Bowen is right. It's a new day in Milwaukee. Tom Barrett is gone, and now I'm here. I've extended the olive branch to work with the legislature, with state government generally. I've said I've got a great working relationship with Governor Tony Evers and support him, but also am a realist and also recognize that Republicans control the legislature, and we have to work with them if we're going to put Milwaukee on the path that it needs to be to move forward.
What will you do differently in terms of that relationship than what the former mayor did?
First of all, I think it's important to do the outreach, to build that relationship, to know one another, to break bread with one another. I'm certainly willing to do that, to make sure we have ongoing lines of communication that are open between the legislature and the mayor's office.
And he didn't have that as far as you know?
Not as far as I know, not to the degree that I'm seeking to have it, and that the speaker and others seem to be willing to engage with me on it as well.
So State Senator Dale Kuenga, a Republican, has been an ally in finding a way to allow for a sales tax increase. But he also demanded a commitment that the city wouldn't cut police positions. Mayor Barrett wouldn't make that promise. Would you?
The issue that we have here is not whether or not we'll cut positions, whether or not we can fund positions. I think that Senator Kuenga also understands, the dire need that the city has in terms of our financial situation. So I'm interested in engaging with him on that. I want to have an adequate number of police in Milwaukee. I've talked about that throughout the course of the campaign. But it's also important to realize that police and firefighters in Wisconsin were not subject to Act 10. And they continue to get raises and increases in benefits and wages that other municipal employees don't get. And so that drives the cost up for those services. So it's fine to have, additional police officers or to maintain a certain number of officers. We have to be able to have the money to be able to sustain those officers as well. So I recognize that. I think Senator Kuenga recognizes that too. And so we'll need the additional support from the state in order to accomplish that.
Well, and this is a follow-up question to that, because there are lawmakers who are upset with the city's crime rate. So how do you guarantee them that additional funding from the state would help address that? Or would you guarantee that?
Yeah, if state lawmakers are upset with the crime rate and want to make investments here with law enforcement, that's great, and I would welcome that. And we would put those dollars, towards those efforts. They're the ones that make the law, And if they want to say, hey, here's some additional dollars for law enforcement, then we would take those dollars and we would invest them into law enforcement and other avenues to combat our public safety challenges here, including violence prevention, including mental health services for folks, including earlier interventions in the lives of young people in our city.
Because I think it's easy to say I want to build relationships and we'll have a working relationship, but you're going to have to give on some of these things. I mean, is there anything that you already think, okay, I would submit to this for funding?
Yeah, again, Senator Cahuenga said, hey, here's an opportunity to have some additional revenue, but we don't want you to cut law enforcement. I'm willing to not do that, but I have to have the money to pay for the additional law enforcement or the sustained law enforcement because the costs continue to go up. I mean, this all goes back to the conversations that we've been having in this community for the past nearly 20 years, where shared revenue just has not kept pace with inflation over time. We're receiving about the same amount of dollars that we received in 2003, 2004, even though the cost of services have gone up since. So we can't expect government in Milwaukee or other local governments across the state of Wisconsin to be able to provide the services that our citizens expect and deserve, our commuters, including folks who live in the districts represented by some Republican members that come into the city every day, and our visitors who come to the city. We can't provide those services that they all expect and deserve if we don't have the revenues in order to pay for those. So I'm interested in doing those things. I need to have the money to be able to pay for it and to do it in a responsible way.
Alex Lasry was at your event on Tuesday when you accepted. Are you backing him in the Senate race?
I had been upfront with my support of Alex way back when I was council president when he first announced.
So you're endorsing him?
I had endorsed him well into the past.
I just wasn't sure if anything would change because when you're talking about going across lines and then you have Republican Senator Ron Johnson also running, how does that say, hey, I'm willing to work with the other side?
Yeah, I think that all of us understand. I think, I have said this, Republican members have said this, like, just because we are willing to work together doesn't negate the fact that I'm a Democrat or they're Republicans. I've said, like, I want to have a working relationship with them, and they seem to want to have a working relationship with me too, and I take them at face value when they say that. But at the end of the day, though, when there's a political competition, I'm not expecting that they're going to necessarily cross over or that I necessarily will cross over. The politics is the politics, but when it's time to govern, then it's simply time to govern. Right? I think that we can separate the two and still find common ground to work together. Like after the politics are done and the dust settles, all of us have a responsibility to move the ball forward for the constituents, whether in the city or in the state, that we all serve. I think everybody gets that.
Well, some critics have accused you of being involved in a cover-up relating to the arrest of one of your brothers, and you've talked about this. The shooting happened in January. He was arrested about 2 months later. So we just want to get you on the record. People are saying you covered this up. What did you know and when?
I didn't know anything, and I've repeatedly said this, and I think it's unfortunate that my former opponent was the one that was spouting this, because for 20 years he claimed to be a massive supporter of police and the police department, and then when politics got involved, he decided to throw the department under the bus and said that there was this massive cover-up. Look, there was no cover-up. I didn't know anything about what was going on, and I had said throughout the course of the campaign that if somebody causes death, harm, or destruction in our community, then they should be held to account. That includes members of my own family. That includes even my own brother. That's what I believe.
Have you talked to anyone in the Milwaukee Police Department about his case?
No, I haven't.
When it comes to the RNC, have you heard from those officials lately?
No, I haven't heard from the officials lately outside of our push, I think it was 2 weeks ago or so, when we were in D.C. with the team from Wisconsin.
Any idea when you'll find out going forward here?
I'm hoping that we'll find out soon, but I don't have a definitive date.
And even if Milwaukee gets it, the Common Council has to sign off. Are you having behind-the-scenes conversations trying to make sure that council members are on your side to bring the RNC here?
Yeah, we are starting to do some outreach to the council. I think the committee that's working to bring the RNC is also cognizant of that fact as well, and will be working with council members to tell them about the benefits that I certainly see in bringing the RNC to Milwaukee. Look, the RNC presents an opportunity to have a nearly $200 million economic infusion into Milwaukee. to support our existing businesses, to help businesses that are scaling up, to put dollars into the pockets of Milwaukeeans who work in the service industries and hotels and in restaurants it puts the eyes of the world on Milwaukee, so that we can secure not only this convention, but other large-scale convention business in the future. I think this presents an opportunity for us to basically create a larger piece of the convention economy in Milwaukee, which is good overall for the city and for the state as well, and I want to see that.
Are there any specific council members you're concerned about who would vote no on this?
You know, I'm going to have conversations with all the council members, and the host committee team will also do the same thing. So we'll make sure that every council member is touched.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about Ukraine, because Milwaukee has the sister city in Irpin, and I know you talked with that mayor on Zoom a few weeks ago. Has there been any more communication there?
I haven't had the opportunity to speak with Mayor Makushin lately, but I know that Irpin has continued to fight valiantly against the Russian efforts in Ukraine. So I'm proud of the work that they're doing there. I know that the community here in Milwaukee has really rallied up in moral support for our sister city as well as for the country altogether. And I want to see those efforts continue.
Going forward, is there anything more that you want to do to help the people there, or perhaps even visit when it might be safe to do so? Yeah,
I certainly did have a conversation with the mayor about visiting, and I'm so very happy to do that when the time is safe to do so.
All right. Mayor-elect Cavalier Johnson, thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne.